Hi, this is Aaron Azrod, and welcome to the fifth part in our series, Rome, the Decline of Democracy. Where we last left off, Mark Antony, due to a number of different distractions, poor planning, and perhaps a lack of willpower, is defeated by Octavius as the next ruler of Rome. Brett, let's continue our story.
Hi, Aaron. Thanks for having me back. So, where we left off, Augustus is at the top of the hill. He has deposed his enemies. He's in control of the vast majority of Rome's military, and there really are no more obstacles, or let me say instead, there are no more existential threats to his power. He's in a very similar position to his uncle, Julius Caesar, was several years earlier, but his approach to power consolidation is starkly different. And as we'll see, it's vastly more successful.
Like you're saying, the impediments are completely gone to consolidating power at this point.
They're not completely gone, but they are mostly gone. They've been, after decades of civil war and purges and counter purges, the fight has been mostly beaten out of the Republicans.
Got it. And as we discussed last time, the average citizen is just regardless of who's in power, they're just happy that there's some moment of peace, right? After like the fourth Civil War.
At this point, they're basically expecting Civil War number 5 to come along any minute. But what they'll be pleasantly surprised. They'll see that this is not another step in the destination or in the journey, but rather this is the destination.
Good. I love pleasant surprises.
Yeah, well, pleasant depends on who you ask, but yeah, we can call it pleasant surprise. So Octavian is now elected the consul, which is like president, right? In a like almost unanimous vote. Because remember, it's not like America where like the people vote, the senators vote. Right. And most of the senators are sycophantic, and the ones that aren't are dead. Right? There's no one really left around to challenge him. So the Senate nominates, and then the People's Assembly votes, but they only nominated him. So who else are they going to vote for? Also, he has control of the military. People see the writing on the wall, right?
Right. So he's basically the last man standing in the graveyard.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And he's elected alongside, because there's two consuls, his childhood friend and longtime ally, Marcus Agrippa. Right. So Agrippa and Octavian, they set about consolidating power and really changing the Republic into the empire. Their first step is they are going to remove all the laws that were passed during the time of the Second Triumvirate, right? That was wartime Octavian. He doesn't want to be that. He doesn't want to be remembered like that. So he's going around and he's fixing all of the little laws he passed that he needed in place to gain power that are no longer necessary, right? He's trying to send a message that law and order has returned to Rome.
Right. Now, I have a question here because Julius Caesar, right? He was just kind of extending his term limit. Like, did he ever say directly, I am now emperor? Or was this just a game of him constantly extending his term limit and he never directly said, I'm emperor?
Julius Caesar extended his term limit first Julius Caesar had the Senate award him dictatorial powers, which was an actual title in Roman government. The dictator was an office you would elect under times of great crises where they had like universal power to do whatever they want, with the idea being that they would give the powers back. The office of dictator was used successfully and unsuccessfully a bunch of times through Rome's history, often times of war, where you didn't want the consuls to change next year because you needed more time to do stuff, right? So I don't want to. So I want to be weary of saying like the dictatorship was a unanimously bad thing, because it wasn't. It was used effectively and correctly for at least a few times. But Julius, it was supposed to be for 5 years. Julius Caesar had himself declared dictator for 5 years, then 10 years, and then forever.
Right. Now, with Octavius, though, he's not even playing any games of extending the term limit. He's like,
Oh
we're
no.
done. We're done being a republic, and now we're an empire, and we're going to have an emperor that rules indefinitely until they die or assassinated or just.
That's the interesting thing, Aaron, is that that's not what happened.
Oh,
Julius
okay.
Caesar is the one who tried to change the government to make himself a king. He's like, this temporary status that you have, I want it forever, which obviously people like, you'd have to be brain dead to not see that as a brazen move for control, right? If
Sure,
someone was
sure,
like,
sure.
someone's like, I think I'm going to be president forever now, and people were like, oh, that sounds fair. Augustus, on the other hand, plays by the rules, sort of. I mean, he kind of has like carte blanche unanimous power, right, to do
Hmm.
what he wants, but he's very much plays by the rules and within the rules to build an empire. He never calls himself an emperor.
Interesting. Wow, wow.
He never does. Most of the emperors of Rome don't refer to themselves as emperors. The word emperor comes from the Latin word imperator, which means like commander. And yeah, it means commander. They didn't refer to themselves like that. They didn't see themselves. Well, maybe they did see themselves like that, but they certainly didn't refer to themselves like that. And we'll get to this in a minute. But Octavian referred to himself as principate, which is actually where the English word of prince comes from.
Hmm.
Um, and principate means like first citizen. So he saw himself more like how the speaker of the house would see themselves. They would be like, I'm the most important person in the House of Representatives, but I'm not the king of the House of Representatives, right?
This is very interesting because we've just been through like 4 civil wars, and I feel like it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction to call yourself emperor, whatever. Like I'm going to just be an emperor. I'm going to bring law and order, but in a way that might be like a death bullet because if you call yourself emperor, now you're going to be under ton, like a ton of attack. Even if you're acting like an emperor, it might just be wiser to call yourself something lesser than.
Oh
It's like
yeah.
I'm not your boss. I'm just simply the overseer manager guy here.
Yeah, a lot of companies do that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The Julius Caesar did not learn your lesson well, and he tried to make himself a king multiple times, and people smelled that, and they did
Mm.
not like it. Augustus, on the other hand, always drapes himself in an air of democracy. He always tries to play things off like, I'm just doing what the people want. I'm an instrument of Republican virtue. And it lets him get away with a lot of stuff. So
Yeah,
much so that the system he puts in place lasts.
this is very interesting because
I
it's
think so.
almost as if the person that calls themselves the humble servant could be far more dangerous than the person who says I'm king or emperor.
Oh, I would wholeheartedly agree that the if you look at I mean, and this is true even today. If you look at countries like North Korea or China, let's focus on North Korea. It's more obvious. I don't think anyone here would disagree that Kim Jong Un, Kim Jong Il, the Kims are dictators, right?
Yeah.
But they don't call themselves that in that country. They're the president, and they have elections, right?
Mm.
They're voted in. Their country is not called the Kingdom of North Korea. It's called like the People's Republic of, freedom and democracy, or some insanely long-winded title, right? Like they know, right? Whenever you have like those like oppressive regimes in South Africa kind of popping up, same thing. They don't call themselves like the Kingdom of the Congo. They call themselves like the People's Republic of whatever.
Mm. So it kind of like these leaders kind of come in under like a populist guise of like, hey, I'm just your humble servant. This is, I speak for the people. And I guess, Octavius probably is a student of Julius Caesar in the sense that he learns all the things not to do because he doesn't want to get assassinated in the Senate or anything like that.
Very much so. And people try. People still try. But Octavius is better at catching them. He has a better PR firm, I guess you'd say. He has an army of poets who end up writing like propaganda for him, and they're much better than Julius Caesar's people. One of the most famous pieces of Latin literature to ever come out of the Western world, the Aeneid, is about Augustus Caesar, right?
Wow. So he
Um,
hires like the Procter and Gamble to handle his PR there.
yeah, and they do. And the funny thing is that I'm sure I don't know what this is like. I'm not sure if you do, but I'm told it's very difficult to manage creative types and get them to do what you want, right?
Yeah,
Because,
yeah.
but he somehow does it. He gets them to produce the Aeneid, which is not only a wonderful piece of Latin prose, but is also fiercely pro-regime, right?
Mm.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here.
Yeah, no, it's just very interesting because I think there's a shift going on here, and maybe this is different. Maybe this is new in the ancient world. This idea of like I'm not just king. I also have an obligation to have like a public relations perception. Like that matters. Even if I don't necessarily need these people's votes anymore, there's still this obligation to portray oneself in a very majestic kind of image. And I think that maybe is a new thing to Rome.
It is definitely a new thing to Rome. I don't think it's new to civilization. Like the Persian Empire, very much their king, going. And I apologize because my Greek history is a little weak, but Xerxes the First, right? Xerxes the Great, very much had a kind of like a principate role in governing Persia, especially during the war with Greece, right?
Mm.
I always find that funny that Western, thanks mostly to Zack Snyder and the movie
Yeah.
300, people vastly misunderstand what was going on in that era. Um, Somehow that story has been warped into a story about like the freedom-loving Greeks facing off against the evil, encroaching Persians when the Persians were a mostly free society and the Greeks were a slave state.
Wow, wow.
So they're annulling the laws that they passed, and these laws that they're annulling are like martial laws, right? They're annulling the laws of conscription, they're annulling the laws of treason trials. They're getting rid of all the things that they leveraged to kind of like steal and amass power to fight their wars. And when I say they, I mean Octavian and Mark Antony, now just Octavian, with Mark Antony being dead. They have 60 legions mobilized. That's approximately 300,000 soldiers. Way too many. You can't have soldiers standing around doing nothing because they get bored and they start rebelling and causing trouble. So they need to be demobilized. The good news is that after this civil war, the entire country of Egypt is the sole ownership of Octavian. Right.
Mm.
And so this time, and Egypt is very rich. They produce a ton of grain. They have a wonderfully efficient government that is set up for someone at the top to just step into and start just reaping benefits. You know what I mean? Some regions, like for example, España, the Iberian Peninsula, they're rich in the sense that they have lots of gold and silver mines, but the time that Octavian is stepping in to kind of take control of the region, there are a bunch of like squabbling tribes. It takes effort to come in and set up the infrastructure to start reaping the benefits, right?
Mm.
With Egypt, it's all ready to go. It's a turnkey operation, right?
Wow, wow.
Show up, collect your check.
Nation flipping right there.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of not just in nations, but in business too. A lot of businesses are like that, where like the person at the top just needs to basically step in and make the money, right?
Yeah.
There's something to be said about that, where what people at the top try to do is they'll try to like link themselves to the effectiveness of the institution that they're running, whether it be a country or a business. and then they try to convince people that without them, the institution cannot function. Right. This is where we get this misnomer where people will say things like, you can't let the airlines fail, you can't let the banks fail. But they don't fail. What rather happens is the people at the top lose their investment and are replaced by new people.
Right.
Like they're still around. You can't get rid of those institutions. They'll always exist. Well, now they'll always exist. It's just the people at the top who took the risk are going to get deposed. So Octavian controls Egypt, and with that, a ton of money. So unlike all the other civil wars where there was unrest and rebellion, this time he has cash to spare, and these soldiers are getting their retirement money, they're getting their retirement land, and they're being, like, farewell, so long, thanks for the help.
And it's kind of ironic almost, because this was Mark Antony's dream, was to control Egypt, and that's what he wanted. And it kind of, and I'm sure that perhaps even some of these former soldiers or legions that were loyal to Antony, they're actually getting their payday under Octavius now.
Yeah, absolutely. A huge portion of Antony's army defected over to Octavian's side.
Wow.
By the end of the Civil War. So they demobilize about half the legions and they stick the others on the borders. That gives them 150,000 men to play with, right? So they make themselves censors, Octavian and Agrippa. This is really important because censors in Rome are more than just what our modern day censors are, in that they count people. Rome, the Senate, it's not a thing you're voted into. It's a status. It's a class. You're born into the Senate. You would say that someone is of senatorial rank.
Right.
And one of the things that the censors get to do is they get to decide who are senators by messing with those statuses. I got to be like, you know what? From now on, only people born in Manhattan are allowed to work in Manhattan. Everyone else who previously considered themselves part of New York City, you're now something else. And by doing that, by controlling the ranks of the Senate, they are able to start manipulating who runs the government.
Now, this is kind of like an early form of gerrymandering. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that's a good way to put it. This is like a very early form of gerrymandering. The Senate, already weakened by the wars and the purging, is further weakened by pulling in provincials, people from outside of Rome, who are loyal to Caesar and Agrippa first, and then Rome second. This is an incredibly dangerous thing that we see even today, that we should, as citizens, be weary of, is when people are appointed not for their skill, but for their loyalty.
Yes. This is highly dangerous. Like, if there's any form of nepotism, or that's my friend over there from college, and now he's going to be in the Justice Department, and this is very dangerous. And I think that's kind of why we instituted, we borrowed this from China, this idea of the civil service, and just this idea that people who occupy a particular station need to be qualified for these jobs. And when we start kind of leaning away from that, we sort of open up the well to a lot of corruption.
Yeah. And the thing is that Octavian appoints people who are actually very skilled.
Okay.
Because previously the rank was closed to only rich people, right? And it still is for the most part. But let's say it's like rich and of noble birth.
Yes.
So a very small pool of people. When Octavian opens it up to provincials, this is something that Rome will do over and over and over again throughout its history, and it's always wildly successful. And we'll see during times that are good, Rome is doing this, and during times that is bad, Rome is not doing this. And what it is Rome is always willing to welcome, not always, when Rome is willing to welcome its newly acquired territories, it's, for lack of a better word, it's immigrants, into the fold and let them make decisions and let them hold high offices, they do very, very well. These people are hard workers. They have good ideas. They have new ways of thinking about things. They come from cultures and they come from societies where certain problems that Rome is facing have already been fixed. and they bring those solutions with them. And we'll see some of the best Roman emperors of all time are provincials, right?
And this is excellent because you're leading to massive cultural diffusion, and you're creating for these new territories, you're creating a lot of buy-in, right? Because if you take over and say, bow before us, we are Rome, well, now you've just turned this into a police state where you have to like police these people. But if you say, hey, congratulations, you're a part of Rome, here's how you can work yourself up the ladder here, then you've created that buy-in with all these like newcomers to the empire.
Oh, absolutely. The early we call this the early empire, the early imperial period, the period
Yeah.
of the Principate is categorized by this of there's a thing in Latin called consensus,
Yeah.
which has a slightly different meaning than what it does in English. In English, consensus means agreement, right? Like the
Right.
consensus is, or in Rome, in Latin, consensus means that you have a right to rule. It's a contract between you and your people saying, I'm going to rule you, and your people agreeing and saying, yes, we will be ruled by you. And consensus is achieved by people liking what you're doing as the ruler, right? And
Yes.
part of the way to do that is to be ruled by people who have your interests in heart. And the people who have your interests at heart are the people who come from where you come from, right?
Yes. 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 I think that's true.
And it's when it's working, and it is working during the golden age of Rome, the Pax Romana, it works very well. You have Roman emperors communicating with provincial nobles who are interested in improving their own communities to make not just their community better, but to make Rome better. You have rich people who are because remember, Rome is, at the end of the day, it is an oligarchy, right?
Right.
It
Yeah.
is ruled by and ruled for the rich. You have the rich building public works because they want their town to be a jewel of the Roman Empire. They want public baths. They want their citizens to be happy. And when that's happening, Rome is at its best. The Pax Romana, Gibbons said, was the best time ever to be alive in world history.
Wow.
you
Wow.
know I don't know if I totally agree with him on that. I feel like modern medicine is pretty important, and I do love Netflix, but I could certainly see where he's coming from, right?
Let's go back in time, Brett.
Yeah. I don't speak Latin though, so I think we might have some trouble.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, so they made themselves censors, and they start tinkering with the senatorial ranks, right? You would think that their plan to consolidate power would be opposed by the Senate here, because the Senate stand to lose the most in terms of having their power stripped away.
Yeah.
But actually, Agrippa and Octavian were aided by the Senate here. There were plenty of people who saw the writing on the wall, or thought they saw the writing on the wall, and decided to throw their lot in with Caesar. And by doing so and adding their power to his, they made it easier for him to pass the laws that he needed to pass to legitimize his rule.
Right. Do you think that they were just Civil War wary at this point? They were just like, enough is enough, and like, I'm willing to give up my senatorial power just for stability. Do you think there was a part of that in the back of their head?
I don't dare speak on the opinions of people who lived 2,000 years ago, but that said, I think that it's a combination of what you just said, which is that they were just sick of it and they wanted everything to go back to normal, and another combination of, imagine if you're in, let's say, North Korea, or let's say you're living here, and like Kim Jong Un sends an email to you and you and 10 other people, and says, like, I need someone to come over and talk about how terrible the West is. I'll pay you, $1 million a year, and you'll live in a palace. Would you say no? How many people would say no? Do you think there's anyone who would agree to that? What about $10 million a year?
Right. Right.
Right?
Everyone has a price.
Everyone has a price, unfortunately. And there were certainly senators who saw financial gain in supporting the regime and were willing to give up democracy to get it.
That's good to keep in the back of our heads. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is that there's no way to fix it. You just have to be weary of when it's happening. You
Yes.
can't get rid of it because, like my analogy, there will always be someone. If not you, someone else will do it, certainly.
And it's just like you just have to bet on the winning horse, because if you don't,
You're
then
dead.
something you're done for, right? It's
Yep,
not even a question of it's not only your greed, it's also your self-preservation in some respect.
absolutely. So these people, they're electing him consul year after year, or nominating him year after year, and they're complicit in. They fight him on the tinkering of the Senate, but he does eventually get his way there. So eventually, they're complicit there, and slowly but surely, the republic, is kind of turned away from being a republic to being an empire. Eventually, being consul for like the millionth time in a row is not working anymore for him. What
Right.
what Octavian is starting to realize is that it's becoming more and more of the curtain is being pulled away more and more. Every time he gets reelected, people are realizing more and more this guy is the supreme ruler of Rome.
Now he's like falling into the Caesar trap, where it's like, wait a minute, that dude is trying to be dictator for
Yeah,
life.
but
Okay.
at this point, he has been ruling for a long time, much longer than Caesar, and people are used to it, right? And so
Mm.
there's less of an outcry, but he is noticing it. And the other problem with being elected consul year after year is that consular is like a title that senators want to reach on their kind of like journey through political office. It's called the cursus honorum, is
Sure.
like the order of offices you take in your political career, and the consul's the last one. And by him being one of the consulars all the time, he's creating a backlog of senators who want to be consular, and they're not happy about it. They're not like fomenting rebellion per se, but they're not happy.
The same thing, the same journey kind of exists in the US. You go to the House, and then you hope to get elected to the Senate, and then if you've been a senator for quite some time, I can't imagine there's any senator who's like, no, 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 I never wish to be president. I think to some degree most of these people got into politics for a reason. So I think when you have a permanent president, you're right. It creates this backlog, and then that backlog turns into resentment. Like, when is this guy going to retire? When's it going to be my time?
That's exactly what was happening.
Yeah.
It wasn't super dangerous, but it certainly wasn't good. He didn't like that, right?
Mm.
So he decides that he's going to change a little bit of the system to make it work, right? So what he does is he retires, right? He retires from the consularship. And if you'll recall from one of our previous discussions, when consulars retire, they retire laterally into proconsular positions, which put them in control of provinces, right? Like that's what happened with Julius Caesar, is when he retired from the consul, he became a proconsular of Gaul, right?
Mm. Mm.
So so Octavian has himself made proconsular of Spain, Syria, Gaul, Egypt, and Seleucia, which is a lot. That's a lot of territories to be proconsular of at the same time. And more importantly, those are border states. And if you'll recall, as from what we discussed, the border states are the ones with the military, because they're guarding the borders from the barbarians or the Persians, who aren't
Right,
Persians
right,
anymore.
right, right.
So he's now in control legally of something like 2/3 of all the military. They report
Hmm.
to him specifically, and the Senate was happy with this. Who better to protect the empire than Octavian, the person who's been steering them and leading them through the good times all this time, right? So now it's something like 19 or 20 of the 28 or 30 legions. Yeah, it's like 2/3. 2/3 of the legions are now under direct control of Octavian.
Mm. Mm.
Octavian adds new temples to the skylines of Rome and has the um, the Sibylline books placed in them, which it doesn't seem like a big deal to us, but it's like, imagine if like Donald Trump moved the largest church in America to like next door to the White House,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
It's like you're consolidating power. That's religious power is power, right?
Right, yeah.
And so, he controls the army. He controls the religion now. He's building these temples and having all of the sacred artifacts moved to his temples, which happen to be next door to his house. Sorry, his estate. It's, rich people, they don't have houses, they have estates. um, in 27 BC, he gets the title because he's not consular anymore. What do they call him? The Senate decides he needs some kind of name.
Yeah.
He is awarded the title of the revered one, or Augustus. And
Ah.
this is when his name becomes Augustus Caesar.
Now this is really remarkable because I think this has happened before, and this is the idea of the false retirement. And I think this is something that even like Putin did. I think he was like, I forgot what year, maybe it was 2012, is that he had been elected, and then he steps down from his role, I believe, as president, and then comes on board on something else. And then it's this idea of like, well, I'm not going to give up my power, but I am going to change my title. And Mao also does this. The Great Leap Forward is a huge failure in China, so he kind of steps down, but he doesn't give up his power. He just stops being president of the country for a while, and then he kind of just bides his time, consolidates resources and other kind of power in another area, and then comes back. So it's this like idea of like falsely retiring, but then still having your hands on the strings at all times.
You're absolutely correct. So what I'll start calling him Augustus now, since that's his title and that's what he'll be known as throughout history. What Augustus does is he has himself named tribune in perpetuity. So tribunes, they have the ability to propose legislation, to vote on legislation, and to veto legislation. If you are a tribune and you have the support of the Senate, you're basically in control of the whole country. And he does have control in the Senate because he packed it before he left, and he's tribune forever. So what more do you need as the supreme ruler of the largest empire the world has ever known?
Right.
Actually, that's not true. I think England might be now, but you get my point. So, he did exactly what you said. He's like, I am graciously stepping down from the role of president, and instead I am just going to be the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Right. But I'm always going to be the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And on top of that, all of the senators are handpicked by me.
I think this is really important, my friend, because I would like to pause here for a sec, because I think that this is something that I was speaking to about this idea of leadership. And we are addicted in our culture to associating leadership with titles. Who's your CEO? Who's the boss? Who's the president? We love these titles. Like the titles is for the average person what signifies power. But what we fail to realize is that truly powerful people can give up titles, can give up roles, but they're just so darn powerful or so darn intelligent and so in control of resources that they remain powerful regardless of what the hell you call them.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. And I don't consider myself to be a conspiracy theorist, and I certainly don't believe that there's like a secret cabal of people running the world. But obviously, it's not always the case that the person in charge is the person in charge.
Right.
There are many, many undeniable instances in history of people pulling the strings behind the curtain. And when we talk about some of the better and worser emperors of Rome, we'll see that comes up. There'll be instances where the power in Rome is not the emperor, it's someone else.
Right. But I think this is very notable for people to it's really important for people to take note of this, because sometimes the people that you don't see can be the most dangerous. Like it's like even in the body, like the most benign thing is actually the thing that gets you in the end. And I think when we look at things, we tend to focus on the loudest and the most visible, but we tend not to see the invisible.
Yeah. The people in power, the people who are good at being in power, work hard to make sure that you're not paying attention to them. Because they're not seeking your approval. They don't care.
And this takes command of the ego. I think that many people want to be powerful because they want the fame, they want the adulation, but true power holders have 100% control of their ego. So they're like, please, friends, don't pay attention to me. I'm just quietly here enjoying my dinner. I'm just, like they're able to kind of control their ego and their need and their quest for adulation and attention. And that is also kind of like a virtue of leadership in a way.
I mean, I think that there's different kinds of rulers, and that
Yeah.
there are some who are the hand behind the curtain. Some of the emperors we'll talk about, but then there are still rulers like Donald Trump who are very much interested in being known for being in charge. Right.
Right.
They're not they part of the deal that they like is being known as the boss, right?
But here's where I'm kind of coming at this. The more spotlight that's on you, yes, you open yourself up to more adulation, but you're also more vulnerable to scrutiny because
Absolutely.
every little thing that you're doing is under the microscope. Whereas the guy in the shadows or the gal in the shadows is able to accomplish a lot more because they don't need to really bend as much to public pressure because they're kind of invisible.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Right. So Octavian is granted the title of Augustus, or revered one, and he's generally, but no one really calls him that
Yeah.
during the time. No one would call him like, oh, revered one. It's too formal. What they call him instead is princeps, or first citizen. Right. It's where the word prince comes from in English. You'll find that a lot of our words come from Roman words, or I guess Latin words would be the right way to say that. Princeps, prince. Where the rich people lived in Rome was the Palatine Hill. It's the origin of the word palace. The Russian king, the Tsar, is named after Caesar. The month of August is named after Augustus. A lot of our stuff comes from that, right? But anyway. So Caesar, or Augustus, really modeled himself as a princeps, as the first citizen. He tried to make his regime feel like he was just leading, the first among equals. He's leading the citizens in their pursuits of a better state and a better community. Right? That's how he viewed himself. That's how he wanted others to view him. He was not a king. He did not dominate people, but rather he was just the guy in charge. And he was the guy in charge because he was the best at it.
This is very interesting that because there's so many psychological. I'm really focusing on the psychology here a lot because it's this idea, and this is something that is really lost in politics today so much, is that we tend to want, there's an increasing demand to get things done through force or through like, I am the ruler, you need to do this. But I think what Augustus is going for, the angle that he's playing, is like, folks, you can call me whatever. I'm just the most capable man in the room, and you're going to have to kind of listen to me because I'm the only one who knows what they're doing. And this is something that I think our politics today is more of like, I want that title, I want that power, and with that power, I'll be able to accomplish what it is that I need to achieve. Whereas we've kind of gone away from the model of like, folks, you don't have to make me powerful, you don't have to make me a king. I'm just the most competent guy in the room, and that's the end of the story.
It's even more than that. It's that it's like we have an agenda that we need to pass, and who shall lead us in our journey, and then the people are like, you should, and it's not organic because he's stuffed the deciders with his own supporters, but it comes across that way, right? He does a good job during his reign of building back up the Senate into an institution of some prestige, not power, but prestige. So you'll have to remember that during these civil wars, the Senate is ravaged, right?
Yeah.
People are killed, people are accused of treason, stripped of their titles, sent into exile. He does good work to give them back some meager authority He's like, I'm gonna like, so like as an example, right? He's as proconsular of all the border territories, he's in charge of 66% of the legions. There's still 33% left. And
Right.
he gives that to the Senate. And he's like, go ahead, make your rules, make your decisions, have fun.
I
Right.
this man is extreme. Like this guy is an like from a philosophy standpoint, this guy is an ultra utilitarian. Like he's very pragmatic in everything he does because I almost feel like he could have achieved these things without even corrupting the deck in his favor. I feel like I feel like the only reason he went the corrupt means is that he just was like, okay, what's the quickest way to fix this problem? Oh, I have to take a little power away from the Senate right now. So be it. It's almost as if like everything that he does is just for the goal of making Rome more functional. And yes, he does kind of, it really makes me question the phrase like, can you use a corrupt means to achieve a justified ends? It's almost as if he's doing that. He's doing corrupt things, but in a way, he's like the only guy who's actually making Rome a lot better than it once was.
I mean, the answer to that question is yes. There's no debate. It's happened. Like I read the history books of Rome, and you'll see that corrupt governments can be a force for good. Right. You could ask, is our corrupt government currently a force for good? And we could debate that, but you definitely cannot debate the total efficacy of corruption. It does sometimes work. And it's working right now in Rome, where Augustus Caesar is reordering the system to put himself at the top, but at the same time, he's greatly improving the lives of the people who live under him. Right.
Wow. Wow.
People love him. Right. He is beloved in his country, empire, state, whatever you want to call it. He eventually gets what amounts to proconsular authority, which is, or sorry, he gets what amounts to like roaming proconsular authority, which means that whatever province he's in charge. But when he's not there, whoever is the actual governor is in charge, right? And by doing this, and he does have a very hands-off approach to ruling the empire, the Senate likes him, right? They appreciate the clout that he's given back to them, and they like controlling the provinces that they control when he's not around. They don't mind when they don't mind so much when when he shows up and like kind of takes control for a little bit, because for the most part he's very hands off.
Wow. Wow.
He's the steady hand, course correcting. He's not holding it down and controlling where it goes.
So he's not. This is amazing because he's not a micromanager, and this
Not at
actually,
all.
and this kind of comes back to a previous podcast that I just did with a man by the name of Jeff, and great leaders are able to empower other leaders, and I think this is very important because when you are a micromanaging leader, even in Rome, like the Senate's like, come on, dude, stop telling me what to do. And the leader who's like, hey, I'll let you guys figure that out. Or, hey, it looks like you guys got this under control. That is leadership over there. Whereas I feel like it's almost a weakness of power when you have an overly authoritarian surveillance like state, because I think it's almost as if you're afraid in your own competency and you're afraid that you might lose power, that you overcompensate with having like an overly surveillance like state.
Absolutely. And not only does it make it so people like you better because you give them autonomy, but just like in general, it's micromanaging means that the buck stops with you in terms of solving problems. And if you don't know how to solve a problem, the problem's not getting solved.
Right.
And you have a better shot of success when you have more experts weighing in than just you.
Yes, because there's only so much one man can handle, right?
Absolutely.
Like you
Right.
can't, like no matter how high your IQ is or how smart you are, it's just you need competent people underneath you that can handle it before it gets to your office. There'll be some problems that only you will have to solve, but the idea is to kind of mitigate that over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I could talk more about Augustus, but I think maybe we've spoken enough about the pre-imperial era. He searched for an heir. I'll very briefly talk about he searched for an heir to kind of inherit his estate, and with that, the money, right? And with that, the titles. So, and he started elevating his nephews to positions of power in the government to start to send the signal that his next of kin would be like the wielder of his authority when he was gone. Remember, no one has said king, no one has said emperor.
Mm,
He's still just a lowly government bureaucrat.
right, right.
In the equivalent of like, imagine if like Bill Clinton, when he was leaving office, was like, oh, and by the way, here's my son who I
His
really
daughter,
think. Right, you're
Chelsea.
right. I apologize. Here's my daughter Chelsea, who I really think you should all vote for the Speaker of the House, right?
Yes,
And then
yes.
all the senators who are loyal to Bill Clinton go like, yes, yes, we'll vote for her. She's great. And then they defer to her going forward instead of him because they know that she is now the wielder of his authority and money and influence. And that's kind of how you have a kingdom without having a kingdom, right?
Yes, yes. And I think that's really important because if you appoint someone your direct heir just because, hey, they're my son or my daughter, everyone's going to be like, oh, king, monarch, we're going to get him.
Yep.
But it just, my son just happens to be the most capable of handling this situation.
What a
Have,
funny
yeah,
coincidence.
what a quinkadink, right? Like, I think you should support them as well. Brett, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Aaron.
This concludes the fifth part in our series, Rome, the Decline of Democracy. I'm Aaron Azrod.